We've given the mandatory 5 minutes. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to yet another distinguished guest lecture brought to you by Dayanand Sagar University and the Board for IT Education Standards, BITES, Bengaluru, on change management, a myth or science. Peter Drucker says, and Peter Drucker is, of course, the guru of management. He's a seer. The greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence, it is to act with yesterday's logic. The single biggest challenge we face as teams, organizations, and a society at large is to adapt fast enough to match the increasing uncertainty and complexity around us. And since all indications are that increasing volatility, complexity, and rapid change is the new normal, organizations will need to find new ways to mobilize their employees to actively participate in gathering insights, creating solutions, and providing leadership. So, of course, we're talking about change management. Today's lecture, change is about that change is a continuous process. Yet the process of change is neither recognized nor accepted by those undergoing it. Human beings, unfortunately, are hardwired that way. There are various reasons: reluctance to move out of comfort zones, insecurities about the new environment, self-doubts about ability to adapt are just a few that create resistance to change. Can these be addressed? Can they be overcome? Are there established rules to manage change? Can change be a painless transition from what is as is to what will be to be? Is change management a myth or science? Today we have with us a very distinguished person in the form of Mr. N.C. Raghuram, who is the former CEO of a consulting company that was at the forefront of change that the Indian pharmaceutical sector underwent in the early years of the 21st century. His company's SpectraSoft technologies enabled many of the leading pharmaceutical companies to transition from a market that was predominantly from the third world to the advanced markets like the United States, Europe, and Japan by implementing solutions that helped them capitalize the generic drugs opportunities. Hailed as a global thought leader in transforming IT in pharma by the CII, Mr. Raghuram has received the inaugural prestigious CIO Excellence Award, instituted by CIOL and DataQuest. DataQuest confirmed on him the title Champion Integrator in 2004 in recognition of his pioneering work of successfully integrating information technology with business strategy. So welcome to Dayanand Sagar University, Mr. Raghuram. Thank you for being here today, and over to you now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon to all the participants. It is indeed a privilege to be given this opportunity to share my experience with a young audience who will shape the future of India and their gurus who are mentoring them. I would like to start by thanking BITES, its chairman, Professor K.N.B. Murthy, Mr. Vidya Shankar, the vice chairman of BITES, Captain Professor Nagaraj Rao, who is coordinating this talk, and Mr. Imtiaz, who has supported technically, as well as my dear friend Arvind Srinivas, who has been instrumental in introducing me to BITES. Just give me a second where I'll switch over to my presentation and then continue the. Yeah, so change is actually an integral part of our daily lives, as Professor Captain Nagaraj Rao mentioned. Yet we hardly recognize change. It is as though everything remains constant, as though nothing has changed. During the initial days when I had opportunities in my career to be the driver of change, I did quite a lot of searching. I would not say research. And this is when I came across this particular quote, which said, when I wake up every day, it appears to be the same as yesterday. But when I look back a few months, a few years, so many things have changed. Change is indeed a constant. While recognizing that change is a constant, we also realize that resistance to change is an unconscious defense. As Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, has said, resistance to change is an oppositional behavior when an individual's unconscious defenses of the ego is threatened by an external source. I'm just shutting off my video is shut off, so that's okay. Yeah, sorry, I'll just continue. Let us look at a few sorry, just give me a second. No, that's okay. You want to come and check. Sorry, I mean, there was an interruption because I am in the office. Pardon me for that. However, does oppositional behavior remain constant in our personal lives? Let us look at a few examples from our lives. I mean, for those from our generation, I'm sure many of us will remember that having a landline telephone was actually one of the prestigious things, and it was also very difficult. We had to wait for years and months to actually get a landline connection. But today, we can get a cell phone connection in a few hours. We used to go to the local kirana shops for our day-to-day grocery requirements. But what has happened? We are now ordering groceries online. Similarly, when we actually look at our own homes, in fact, the food in our own homes, our mothers, our sisters, our grandparents used to prepare our meals. Today, there has been actually a transformational change when we can order food online, sitting at home, and then the amount of food that is cooked in our homes has actually come down quite substantially. Let us look at the transactions in terms of cash. We were doing most of our transactions from cash, but today it's all digital payments. See, some of the changes, some of us actually adapt quite quickly to change. Some of us actually take a little bit more time. I mean, if you ask me, I took a little bit of time after initial hesitancy to adapt to the digital payment, and some are slow. But eventually, a majority of us adapt to this change, or what I would call as a new way of life, and comparatively with minimum resistance to the changes. Let us look at some of the reasons as to why we adapt to change so easily in personal life. Convenience, comfort, peer pressure, status. In personal life, we adapt to change. We spoke about convenience. We spoke about comfort. I would like to tell you about Bengaluru. Bengaluru was known as the pensioners' paradise at one time. The cost of living was affordable to pensioners, hence the title Pensioners' Paradise. There was also another reason and another name for Bengaluru. It was called the air-conditioned city. With the humongous development since the 1980s, Bengaluru has transformed. It has indeed changed. Change for good or change for the worse is not the point. That it has changed is the fact. Bengaluru has changed from an air-conditioned city to a city of air conditioners. Those of you who come from places that have hotter climates than Bengaluru today may not agree with me, but for people like me who have been born and have lived in this city, Bengaluru has changed from a city that needed no fans even in summer to a city where air conditioners are required during most of the months. And we have adapted to this change. So, change in personal life is easier to adapt. But what about changes in professional life? Just sharing a few cartoons. These are more in the lighter vein because I mean, these in my own experience, I've come up with these kinds of comments in may not be in exactly the same way that is depicted in the cartoons, but very similar. Like for example, one of the things is, say, I want to find a bold and innovative way to do everything exactly the same way it has been done for 25 years. That is, there is a resistance to change, and the resistance, one of the main reasons for the resistance to change is that people do not want to move out of their comfort zones. Same is the case, where you are seeing the cartoon which says, one of the the employees saying, "Look, my friends, it's a panic alarm. It goes off every time management shows any interest in another reorganization." See, this may not exactly depict what happens in reality, but there is a humorous side to this. But in reality, there is resistance to change. But why does the resistance to first change come in? Because everything in our world today is changing, whether it is in personal life or even in businesses. See, many of the businesses actually keep looking at innovations. They would like to actually do a business process re-engineering, that is, completely make a change in the way they work, which could be perhaps to bring in more efficiency, it could be to reduce manpower, it could be to lower costs. Similarly, many of the companies today are bringing in automation. See, when we even look at what is happening in the information technology field today, we talk about IoT, Internet of Things, we are talking about artificial intelligence. It has transformed, so many things that, that we knew and which we took for granted, which have become obsolete today. Similarly, computerization. Very few companies today carry out their operations using manual methods. Most of them have computerized. Most of the businesses today have at least one simple application called a tally accounting software through which they do it. Many of the companies also, in fact, look at complete overhaul of business models. Taking an example from a manufacturing company, there were times when companies used to manufacture their goods, stock it, and then look for buyers. Many of these companies today have overhauled their business models to change to getting the order from the customer and then manufacturing it. This is a massive change. There are several benefits to the company because first and foremost, the cash flow improves, the working capital pressures actually reduce quite considerably, as well as the interest cost for a company also goes down. But for the employees involved, these changes actually bring in quite a lot of stress. However, while companies have to have the clarity in what is the change that that they want to actually carry out, they also have to, in fact, look at the people. The first and the first thing that the employees, when a change is proposed, is that they perceive threats. Threat to the way they have been working so far, disturbance to their comfort zones. A disturbance to their comfort zone actually leads to insecurities. Insecurities about losing the job and concerns whether they can get another job leads to further problems. Not only would they be worried about their own selves, they'll also start worrying about their families. These insecurities create self-doubts like, am I good enough to be considered for these changes that the company is doing? Can I adapt to the changes? Will I lose my job? So normally what happens is employees resist change. You have now seen how change is perceived by the individuals in their personal life and in the work life also. This is defined as the concept of resistance to change that refers to people experiencing an emotional anxiety caused by the prospect of a transformation or change that is taking place. Has this resistance from the employees stopped change in organizations? I'm sure most of us have actually seen how physical hard copies have actually been replaced by soft copies, which are now stored in magnetic media. There used to be a time when huge spaces were required for storing these files. Many of us from my generation will remember when we went to our banks, our accounts were maintained in huge books called ledgers. All entries were made by hand. When bank management decided to computerize banking transactions, there was a hue and cry. Fears were expressed about jobs becoming redundant. Trade unions went on strike, resisting computerization. But the banks went ahead with computerization. And what happened thereafter? The government also opened up the banking sector to private players. Banks like ICICI, HDFC, IDBI set shop. There were so many new banks that came in. And these banks hired the experienced personnel from the government controlled banks. And what was the result? A fear that computerization would make jobs in bank redundant. In reality, became an opportunity for many for career advancement and earning higher incomes. Similar things have happened in manufacturing, where conventional machines were replaced by CNC machines. In fact, one of the most profound impact of change happened in the IT sector recently. We are all aware of it. When the Wuhan virus pandemic struck the world last year, IT sector employees were asked to work from home. This was unheard of and unprecedented. But the change happened in this sector too, like in the banking, manufacturing, and other sectors. All the changes are forced. Forced due to competition adapting to new technology, hence becoming more agile, and competitive, forcing peers to opt for the change too. However, will change because of compulsions be successful? Will change for the sake of change work? Will change be successfully implemented? The answer, I would say, would be an emphatic no. From a business point of view, there has to be a clarity on why the change is required. What are the benefits the business is going to derive? What are the resources required for bringing in the change? What are the methodologies that will be used for bringing in the change? But having taken care of all this, having defined all this, will there be a guarantee for success? The answer would again be no. Why? Because all the changes have to involve people at every level in the organization. And unless the people are included, they are taken into confidence, the change will not be successful. First and foremost, when an organization wants to go through a change, they have to send out a message about the commitment of top management. It has to be demonstrated. Each individual should be informed about their role, what responsibilities they carry, and what is the value addition that they will get from the new implementation. The cultural ethos should be integrated into the change management strategy. A clear communication to the individual with what are the career benefits should be very clearly communicated at the individual level. And last but not the least, all the concerns, whatever self-doubts, whatever insecurities are there, they should actually be addressed effectively and they must be dispelled. And finally, the individual should demonstrate the commitment and conviction that the change the organization is bringing in will not only benefit the organization, it will also benefit the person individually. The resistance to change should be a win-win and the buy-in should be obtained. Only then will the new initiative be successful with minimum resistance to change. There are several successful change management techniques. I'm sharing some of them. Having gone through the issues concerning change management, one may ask, with all the established techniques, can success be guaranteed? I have been a change manager for about 3 decades now. In fact, one of the participants in this talk is Mr. Professor A.G. Krishnan, who was my colleague, and we worked together somewhere in the mid 1990s. And he is actually witness to some of the change management techniques that I had applied in one of the companies that now I was implementing ERP, which I will explain later. But the question that actually comes back here is, does the techniques all the way, even if all the techniques of change management, if they are applied, will it still be successful? See, whenever I'm asked this question, I always remember about this book from Mark McCormack. Mark McCormack is the person who actually founded the sports management company called IMG. And the title of book which I'm sharing with you is What They Don't teach you at Harvard Business School. This is a book that was published in 1994. From my experience, I would say there are techniques, there are scientific basis too. But when dealing with people, improvisation based on the situation is the most effective technique. What is this improvisation? I was implementing a ERP solution in the early 1990s for an MNC that had set up shop in India. This was an era when having a desktop computer on your desk was considered a status symbol. In fact, many senior executives would have the computer on their tables as showpieces. They would not even remove the plastic covers that covered the monitors. When I found that people were not willing to sit in front of their computers for training them on the ERP, I convinced the management to permit me to load games on every desktop. Over a period of time, people slowly started switching on their systems and then started playing the games. The next thing that they did was they became even more curious, and then they started looking at the various programs that were loaded. See, some of these were very simple applications like MS Office with a Word or an Excel. In fact, at those times, Lotus 123 was a very popular office automation package. So they started looking into it. After a few weeks, what we did was we actually deleted or removed all the games. And then we started slowly exposing them to the ERP package by training them. And ERP was a tremendous success in that company. I think as far as I know, even around 2017-18, even after about 20 years, the same ERP was being used in this company. So no textbook will teach this technique that I explained to you. This has to be innovated. So there is no hard and fast rule that this is going to yield the results. So this is how actually a change management should be managed. It is partly theory and partly innovation. What I would like to do is, I would like to, before I sign off, share a small 2-minute video with all of you. Where is this? Is the video visible? Is the video visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Some of you may have seen this video, but I would request your patience for the next 1 minute or so. So I'm sure, ladies and gentlemen, you will agree with me if I say that change management is definitely not a myth, nor is it, well, it is a science, but it is not an exact science. Also, it is required that we have to undergo change as a force of nature, but change in life is inevitable. Thank you. I would like to take questions if there are any.
Sort of, Mr. Raghuram, can you stop sharing, please?
Oh yeah, I'll do that. Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
I think it's okay now. Yes.
So we have a question from Professor Suresh Ranganathan, who's my colleague here in the business school. And he says that given the rapid transformation in the world due to the impact of artificial intelligence, what would be the role of leadership in change management of the future? Whereas the fear at large is, will AI take away the human requirement in various organization processes in the future? Will change management itself change? So this is a kind of metaphysical question a little bit, and so on. So fundamentally, I think he's asking about how technology is impacting all of us, and will accelerate, and what are your thoughts, please?
Yeah, I mean, see, change management techniques will have to keep evolving. That also, cannot actually be at a standstill. With the change in technology, the nature in which the technology changes, the adaptation to change management will also have to happen. And the leadership, I think, I mean, if you ask me, computerization was one actually a transformational change that happened maybe 2.5, 3 decades ago. Today, we're actually seeing another kind of a transformational change with IoT and artificial intelligence coming in. But the awareness about the way how people will have to be taken along with all these changes, the management are and the leadership is much more aware today. So the leadership also, in fact, is undergoing a change. Because in my early days, when I became a change manager, I used to actually hear CEOs or my company owner say, "Look, boss, this is my company and I want this change. Everyone should fall in line." To today, there is a realization that the owner or the business leader is very much there, but people also have to go along, even for a business to be successful, let alone a change be successful. So it is a continuously evolving process, if you ask me.
Right. Thank you. And it's a continuously evolving process. And even as technology starts making an impact, change will evolve in its own way. I have a question from Mr. Debapriya Bhaduri, who's a student of Executive MBA. He's a working professional, very smart young man. And he says, change management is usually taken in the higher echelons, like you said, in leadership positions. That is, at the senior level. How can the middle management help in change? I see this juxtaposed between their team needs and not trying to display insubordination. So he feels that driving change seems to make you unpopular, or that's the line I'm reading from Devapriya, which is sometimes true. People who drive change become unpopular. So he's saying that the top management wants change, the lower management does not want change. How do you do this?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I mean, I absolutely agree. A change manager is not a hero. Normally, the change manager is the villain. Okay, and having said that, See, this is where, in fact, one has to have a cohesive, seamless understanding and agreement on how the change will have to happen. The onus is definitely on, the senior management to clearly communicate about, the change, and also convince the stakeholders, not just at the middle management, even, at every level of the organization, what the transformation, what is it going to bring to the organization. And like I shared during my presentation, see, each individual should actually, it should be addressed at the individual level. See, that is what I normally do when I take up change management assignments, one of which I am actually right now going through. In fact, this is a 1,400 people organization, and we have actually organized a change management team. And we have one person who has been nominated to take, I mean, to actually listen to people, their concerns, and then, give them the solution. So it has to be done at every level in the organization, and it has to be addressed on a continuous basis. And finally, people will have to be convinced so that they get committed to the change. So the conflicts will be there, but the conflicts will have to be managed and overcome. And the only way is actually to convince.
Right. And probably convince and nudge people in the right direction. And, we can also sort of give an example of our Honorable Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, who had to repeal farm laws. People were not ready for change. And in a sense, he had to backtrack. Yeah. So somebody as powerful as the leader of this country. All right. We have another question from a student of executive education, Suruvi Swain. And she says that if somebody is doing well professionally and in personal life, why change at all? Maintain the status quo. Don't change. What's the problem?
I mean, I would like to ask her, has she remained the same?
That's what she feels.
I mean, nothing personal. I mean, it's just as a part of, this discussion. It's impossible to remain constant, whether it is professionally. If someone says, look, professionally I'm doing well, I would like to remain constant, I don't want to change, they will actually be overtaken by events, and the changes very fast. So change becomes a compulsion more than a choice.
Yeah, and I think in a sense, the ecosystem is changing so much around us that it is
right,
difficult to remain divorced from that ecosystem. So there goes Survi, that's your answer. So we have a question from Mr. Sharath, who sort of, I think the question, he says that, I think because he's leading from the fact that you come from the pharma domain in a sense, and he says, what's the status of generic medicine in the current condition? How far it is for a common man? So I don't know what to make of that question. I've just read it out. So I think he wants to know what is the future of generic medicine in probably India, because India is a leader in generic medicines and so on and so forth. And will it become cheaper for the common man? Maybe that's his question.
See, the generic medicines by themselves, I mean, if you look at, the meaning of the generic medicines, it means that, these are medicines for which the original patents have expired, and which permits companies who are not the original innovators to develop their own processes of manufacturing the drug, and ensuring that the original medicinal properties, I'm just using a general English terminology, which is the efficacy of the medicine as well as the safety of the medicine, is actually maintained. So India in a way was very lucky, because India did not recognize the patent regime till the product patent regime. I'm sorry, till they signed the WTO accord in 2005. But by the time they actually signed the WTO accord in 2005, a majority of the drugs that were invented up to that point of time were either the patent had expired or they were very close to where the patents would be expiring. And there was also a period of about 10 to 15 years when new innovations in the drug market was very, very slow. See, this is where the Indian pharmaceutical companies capitalize on two fronts. One is, they leverage on their excellent strength of re-engineering the original method of, or the process of manufacturing a drug. And the second is, that they took advantage that the patents no longer existed for these drugs, which opened up the advanced markets like the US. So that is when and what also happened is, with the patents expiring, it's not just one or two, several companies actually started manufacturing. One example that we could recall would be when one of the Mumbai-based pharmaceutical companies came up with the AIDS drug cocktail that was actually given, which used to cost something like a couple of $1,000 a month before, I think it was Cipla or someone who innovated it and then brought in the generic version of the AIDS medicine, which actually came to about 1,000 rupees or 1,500 rupees. See, this is what happens when, with the generic drugs coming in. So the prices have already dropped. However, my friend who asked this question may still, be having this doubt in his mind. Then why are some of these drugs still expensive when we go to a pharmacy? That is because most of these companies have, find out a workaround where when they add some ingredient, they move out of what is called as the controlled drug prices. See, that is when they become expensive. So, and most of the doctors actually prefer to prescribe these medicines. But the basic drug is still, a generic drug is still very cheap. See, one of the example of an additive that I can give is, let us say, some of them are slow release, long sustaining, etc. So when you add that, they don't come under the regime of the price control. So those, even though they are generic drugs, they are expensive. But basic medicine without these additives are also equally effective. And those are very, very cheap. One of the examples that I can give here is, see, diabetes is so prevalent in India that many of us actually take a medicine which generic name is called as metformin. A strip of 500 mg costs about 16, 17 rupees. But the same metformin with the SR, which is the slow release, would cost about 60 rupees. So this is the difference. So even among generic drugs, we have to learn to distinguish which is actually the cheaper version, which is equally effective, and that will make it accessible to the common man.
Right. Very interesting. And how, even generic drugs are sort of marked up in terms of price, and how do they get beyond the drug control? And I hope, Sharat, your question was answered in how does it affect the common man and so on and so forth. I have a question, Mr. Raghuram, that, human beings are driven by two primary, if I may say, primitive forces or primal forces. That is, one is our urge to survive. That is, and they say that humans have actually survived for as long as we have survived, because in a sense we resist rapid change. And the other, force that drives humans is the need to thrive. That is the need for excitement, the need for growing, the need to challenge. So these are two forces, countervailing forces that act upon us. So on one hand, while we resist change, there is also a force that pushes us to change because we want to experience several of these things. And would you say that in today's world, a manager's job is to incite that excitement in challenge new opportunities, new areas, motivate people, and so on? Is that the way for new managers? Your thoughts, please.
See, Evan, again, there is no universal method or process which would actually give a solution, because there are so many variables that would impact this. It would impact on the way the company itself is structured, the way the company operates. It all from there it also comes to the individual and what I would call as the fire in the belly of the individual to succeed and the thrive and succeed. So it would be very, very difficult to give an answer that would satisfy the entire gamut which the question encompasses. So I would say that depending upon a comprehensive grasp of the environment, the individual should actually take the decision. But within a manager's role, wherever you go, whatever roles, whatever organizations they actually are in, they will have ample opportunities to create an exciting environment for people who work in their team.
Right. So in that context,
this is with the yes. So it is definitely possible.
Right.
See, one simple way would be that they can empower their subordinates within the gamut of empowerment that he has, for them to actually take decisions, which would be a very motivating factor for youngsters, rather than they're having to await instructions from the top of what to do.
Yeah, I think autonomy and empowerment are very important.
Absolutely.
Freedom and independence at work. So in that context, do you feel that maybe organizations have to relook at their structure? After all, organization structures have remained fairly archaic over several years. So maybe it's a time also when this organizations look at their the way they have drawn up their structure. Many of them are still hierarchical driven, and so on and so forth. Maybe it's a time to change and look at structures by themselves in a workplace. And just a thought for everybody. And Mr. Raghuram, it's been a pleasure having you here, and fascinating talk on change, whether it's a myth or a science. I think we can conclude that we need to apply our minds to change because it's so important. And I would like to thank you profusely on behalf of the Anand Sagar University, BITES, my co-panelists here, Professor Arvind Srinivas, who I understand invited you, Professor Shahina Parveen, who's here, Professor Jasma Balasangameshwara, who has sort of coordinated BITES activities for a couple of years now, as far as I can see. And of course, my colleague, Mohammad Imtiaz from the School of Commerce and Management. And thank you very much. If nobody has final thoughts, then I will sort of conclude this session. Any of the panelists have anything to say? Please go ahead. Okay, I think
this is Dr. Shahina here.
Yes, please.
It was a wonderful session, and it is much more important and needy session for all of us because change is required. Sir, I really thank you for giving such a knowledgeable and eye-opening session. I'm thankful to the organization and the head who has organized this. It was really a wonderful one, sir. Thank you so much from my side for
Thank you.
being
You're
with
welcome.
us.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Raghuram, I invite you to Dayanand Sagar University, and when an opportunity arises, please come, and we would like you to address our students physically here on campus, and that would be a pleasure.
Certainly, Professor. And thank you very much once again for this opportunity. I mean, it was a pleasure interacting with all of you. And anytime, where I could share my experience, I could be of help, please do let me know. In fact, I live in the southern part of Bangalore. So your college is not too far away from me. So I can, definitely come over and spend time. Thank you.
No, and I am not aware if you lecture, but I can tell you gut feel is that you will be a great success in a classroom.
So thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so you have a very engaging style, and definitely we will have you in class one of these days. Thank you so much.
Sure, certainly. It'll be my pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you,
Bye.
everybody, for attending. All participants.